Some crimes are remembered for their violence, others for their cruelty, but the crimes that stay with us the longest are the ones that leave behind silence and questions that will never be answered. This is one of those stories. In the spring of 1922, on a remote farmstead in Bavaria, Germany, an entire family was brutally murdered. 6 people were killed. No one was ever convicted. And more than a century later, the mystery still disturbs investigators, historians, and true crime researchers around the world. This is the story of the Hinterkaifeck murders. Hinterkaifeck was not a village. It was not even a hamlet. It was a single farm, isolated in the countryside, surrounded by dense forest and open fields. The nearest neighbors lived miles away. There were no streetlights, no passing traffic, no sense of protection. At night, the farm was swallowed by darkness. The silence there was the kind that pressed against your ears, the kind that made every sound feel closer, heavier, more threatening. The Gruber family lived alone on that land. Andreas Gruber was the head of the household. He was known as a strict, domineering man, hard-working, short-tempered, feared more than respected. His wife, Cecilia Gruber, lived under his rule, quiet, submissive, rarely seen speaking when her husband was present. Their daughter, Victoria Gabriel, had returned to the farm after her husband was killed in World War I. She was a widow, living once again under her father's roof. Victoria had 2 children, 7-year-old Cecilia, a bright and intelligent girl, and 2-year-old Joseph, still a toddler. Together, the family worked the farm, raising animals, tending crops, and living largely cut off from the outside world. At the end of March 1922, they hired a new maid. Her name was Maria Baumgartner. She had accepted the job after the previous maid quit suddenly, claiming the farm felt haunted. Maria arrived on March 31st, 1922. It was her first day at Hinterkaifeck. It would also be her last. But the horror of what happened that night did not begin on March 31st. It had started months earlier. In the winter before the murders, Andreas Gruber began noticing strange things around the property. One morning, he stepped outside and saw footprints in the snow. They came from the forest. They led straight toward the house. But there were no footprints leading away. The tracks simply stopped. Andreas was disturbed by this, but he told no one at first. Later, when he did mention it to neighbors, he brushed it off as something unimportant. Then came the sounds. Late at night, when the farm should have been quiet, Andreas heard footsteps above him. Slow, deliberate movement in the attic, the sound of someone pacing. When he climbed up to investigate, there was no one there. No signs of forced entry. No animals. No explanation. Tools began to go missing. A pickaxe, a wrench, a set of keys. Days later, some of them would reappear in strange places. The key to the house vanished entirely. The family dog became restless and aggressive, barking into the darkness, growling at empty corners of the yard, refusing to settle. Even so, the family stayed. They did not leave the farm. They did not report these events to the police. Whatever was happening was allowed to continue. By the time March arrived, something unseen had already claimed the farm. On the evening of March 31st, the family went about their routine. Dinner was eaten. The animals were settled for the night. The lamps were lit. Outside, the forest stood still. At some point after nightfall, someone entered the barn. No one knows who went first. No one knows how they were lured inside. But one by one, members of the Gruber family walked into the darkness. The killer was waiting. The weapon was a mattock, a heavy farming tool with a sharp blade and crushing weight. The first blow was delivered to Andreas Gruber. It shattered his skull.
There was no warning, no chance to fight back. His wife followed him into the barn. She was struck down just as brutally. Then Victoria, then her daughter, little Kazelia. The attacks were savage, deliberate, personal. The killer did not rush. Medical examiners later discovered something deeply disturbing. 7-year-old Kazelia may not have died immediately. She had torn out handfuls of her own hair. She may have been conscious for hours, lying among the bodies, listening to the sounds of the farm, waiting for help that never came. After killing 4 people in the barn, the murderer did not leave. Instead, they walked calmly into the house. Inside, Maria Baumgartner, the new maid, was asleep in her bed. She had been on the farm for only a few hours. She was killed where she slept. Then the killer moved to the nursery. 2-year-old Joseph lay quietly in his crib. He never woke up. By the end of the night, 6 people were dead. An entire family wiped out. But what happened next is what truly separates this crime from most others. The killer stayed. For days after the murders, someone remained on the farm. The cows were fed and milked. The animals were cared for. Food was taken from the kitchen and eaten. A fire was kept burning. Smoke rose from the chimney. From the outside, Hinterkaifeck looked normal, alive. Neighbors later recalled seeing signs of activity, nothing that suggested a massacre had taken place. All the while, 6 bodies lay where they had fallen. Days passed. Mail piled up. The children failed to attend school. The farm grew unnaturally quiet. Finally, on April 4th, neighbors decided something was wrong. They went to the farm. What they found would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Inside the barn, 4 bodies lay stacked together, partially covered with hay. In the house, they found the maid in her bed and the toddler in his crib. The rooms were clean, orderly. Nothing of value had been taken. This was not a robbery. This was not random violence. This was personal. Police arrived and began an investigation, but from the very beginning, critical mistakes were made. The crime scene was not secured. Curious villagers were allowed to walk through the house. Evidence was touched, moved, destroyed. The bodies were handled before proper examinations could be done. Autopsies were conducted in the barn itself. Days later, investigators discovered the murder weapon. It was hidden in the attic. The same attic where Andreas Gruber had heard footsteps months earlier. The investigation spiraled into confusion. Suspects emerged, then vanished. Former farmhands were questioned. Neighbors were interrogated. Travelers were investigated. Dark rumors about the Gruber family surfaced. Stories of abuse, control, secrets buried behind closed doors. Years earlier, Andreas Gruber and Victoria had been accused of incest. Charges were filed, then dropped. Some believed Joseph was not Victoria's husband's child, but Andreas's. Many believed Andreas was the real target. Others believed the killer was someone who knew the farm well, someone comfortable enough to remain there after the murders. A rejected lover, a former employee, someone seeking revenge. One of the most chilling theories suggests the killer may have been hiding in the attic for weeks, watching, listening, learning the family's routines, waiting for the right moment. Despite years of investigation, no one was ever charged. The case grew cold. Files were closed. Leads dried up. Eventually, the farmhouse was demolished. The land was cleared. Today, nothing stands where the house once was. No marker, no memorial. Just empty ground and unanswered questions. More than 100 years later, the mystery of Hinterkaifeck remains. Who left the footprints in the snow? Who moved through the attic in the dark? Who fed the animals after the murders? And who lived in that house, sleeping under the same roof with the dead? The Hinterkaifeck murders remain one of the most chilling unsolved crimes in history, and the silence of that farm still speaks louder than answers.